Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Selamat datang ke Bank Negara Malaysia. Pada sidang akhbar ini, pertumbuhan ekonomi negara serta perkembangan moneteri dan kewangan pada suku yang kedua tahun 2015 akan diumumkan. Ekonomi negara mencatatkan pertumbuhan sebanyak 4.9% pada suku kedua. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you. This must be really the record turnout. Well, we hope we live up to your expectations. The expansion of global economic activity remained moderate in the second quarter, and while the US and UK economies continued to recover, improvements in the Euro area and Japan were more modest. The Chinese economy sustained growth of 7% in the second quarter as targeted policy measures provided support to economic activity. In the region, growth was supported by domestic demand. The Malaysian economy registered a growth of 4.9% in the second quarter, with private sector demand remaining the key driver to growth during the quarter. On a seasonal adjusted quarter-on-quarter basis, the economy grew by 1.1%, and this is important. On the supply side, the major economic sectors continued to expand, but at a more moderate pace during the quarter. Following the lower growth in household spending, the services sector grew by 5% due to the moderation in most of the services subsectors. Meanwhile, the agriculture sector turned around to register a positive growth of 4.6% amid higher production of palm oil. Can you stop the photo taking, please? Growth in the construction sector moderated to 5.6% due to slower activity in the residential, non-residential and civil engineering subsectors. The manufacturing sector recorded a moderate growth of 4.2%, attributed to more modest performance in export-oriented industries. The mining sector recorded a growth of 6% amid lower output of natural gas, and this was mainly because of maintenance work for oil and gas fields were carried out in the second quarter. Now, the private sector domestic demand remained the key driver of growth, expanding by 5.7% during the quarter. Private consumption expanded by 6.4%, while private investment grew by 3.9%, and private sector spending expanded by 0.9% during the quarter. This was mainly public consumption expanded at a higher rate of growth, reflecting stronger increase in both emoluments and supplies and services. Public investment, however, recorded a decline during the quarter, following a decline in investments by the public enterprises, and also the near completion of a few of the large projects in transportation, infrastructure, and resource-based manufacturing subsectors. The federal government spending on fixed assets remained positive during the quarter. Net exports recorded a negative growth of 10.5% during the quarter, due mainly to weaker exports and lower global demand. compared to the strong growth of 8.8% in the first quarter, which lifted by front-loading of purchases prior to the implementation of the sales and services tax, that is the GST. Private consumption growth moderated to 6.4%. I should mention that the average growth of consumption is 6.7%, so it's just marginally lower than the average long-term growth of consumption. And the moderation, and we knew, of course, during the first quarter there was significant front-loading of consumption prior to the implementation of the GST, and so we have a 6.4% growth in the second quarter. However, we should note that during the quarter there was still wage growth and stable labor market conditions, and this remained supportive of overall consumer spending, which can be described as firm. And we should note, of course, that consumers benefited from the lower fuel prices. Private investment growth moderated to 3.9% during the quarter, and this is attributed to a decline in spending on machinery and equipment, especially in the transportation segment, as the total number of aircraft delivered in the second quarter was lower compared to the same period in 2014. And despite the slower pace of dwellings, investment in structures remains supported by capital spending in the manufacturing and services sector, particularly in the export-oriented industries. The current account surplus in the balance of payments remained sizable at 7.6 billion ringgit, and this accounts for about 2.7% of GNI in the second quarter, supported by the continued surplus in the goods account and a lower deficit in the primary income account. The goods account continued to record a surplus, and the lower surplus was due to slower trade activity amid modest growth in global demand and continued weakness in the commodity prices. The primary income deficit was, however, lower due to higher income from direct investment abroad. Income on foreign direct investment was sustained, and this is important for a country like Malaysia. We have been the recipient of foreign direct investment for more than 100 years, and we have a steady inflow of such investments because Malaysia continues to be an important profit center for these investments. The deficit in the services account was, however, higher due to lower travel receipts, and the higher services deficit also reflects Malaysia's continued reliance on foreign services providers, particularly in the transportation and other services. As in June 2015, Malaysia's external debt remains manageable at 794.3 billion ringgit, equivalent to about $208.4 billion US dollars, or 68% of GDP. And the rise in external debt in ringgit terms is partly due, of course, to the valuation effects of foreign currency denominated borrowing with the depreciation of our currency. Nevertheless, at this level of external debt, it remains manageable. The valuation effects are essentially contained as corporate borrowings are largely hedged. A significant share of these borrowings is intercompany loans with flexible and concessionary terms. The banking sector borrowings are partly covered by corresponding external assets. Excluding valuation, the higher external debt reflects the increase in the banking sector's external debt due largely to the centralization of their foreign currency liquidity management operations. Malaysia's external debt is skewed towards medium and long-term tenures, with the short-term external debt amounting to 43% of total debt, and as at June 2015, short-term external debt stood at 340.7 billion ringgit. It is manageable and has limited immediate claim on international reserves. This is because more than 2/3 of the short-term external debt is accounted by the banking sector, largely in the form of interbank borrowings and non-resident deposits. The debt liabilities are partially covered by the bank's corresponding external assets. So this accounts for more than 43%. And the bulk of other short-term debt liabilities reflect trade-related and direct investment activities. These are trade credits and are largely backed by export earnings, and intercompany loans are generally, as I've mentioned, flexible to their companies and on concessionary terms. Headline inflation was higher at 2.2% in the second quarter, and this was within our expectations as we priced in these increases. This was mainly due to the impact of the implementation of the goods and services tax, which replaced the sales and services tax. The price increases were broad-based, with all 12 categories of the CPI basket registering higher inflation in the second quarter. Meanwhile, core inflation remained stable. The lower global commodity prices have partially offset the impact from the weaker ringgit, and then inflation for Malaysia's trading partners also remained low, thereby contributing to lower imported inflation. The Monetary Policy Committee maintained the OPR at 3.25 at its meeting on 9th of July. And the Malaysian economy is expected to remain on a steady growth path, with domestic demand remaining as the key driver to growth. Headline inflation is expected to be higher due to domestic cost adjustments before moderating towards the second half of 2016. And the underlying inflation is, however, expected to remain contained amid stable domestic demand conditions. The Monetary Policy Committee recognizes that there are heightened risks to global growth and financial conditions, and these risks are being carefully monitored to assess their implications on the macroeconomic stability and prospects of the Malaysian economy. At the current level of the OPR, the stance of monetary policy continues to remain accommodative and supportive of the economic activity. Turning to the currency markets, all major and regional currencies, including the ringgit, have depreciated against the US dollar since September of 2014. This is a reflection of the persistent US dollar strength, which has appreciated by 22% against its trading partners since July 2014. And this is largely due to expectations of the interest rate normalization by the Federal Reserve Bank amidst the steady recovery in the US economy. The ringgit, however, faced more significant adjustments due in part to the lower global crude oil prices and domestic specific factors. Since July 2014, global crude oil prices have declined about 55%. As a result, currencies of oil and commodity exporting countries, including the ringgit, have experienced larger adjustments. And if you look at the chart that we have presented, these adjustments of the ringgit are somewhere in the middle, with South Africa being 15.7% and Russia by 41%, and the ringgit 21.1% is somewhere in the middle, together with Australia and New Zealand. For businesses, there are segments which may face higher costs due to their high import content, but there are also businesses who benefit from the depreciation with higher export earnings. In terms of household spending, the impact of higher import costs is expected to be modest and partially offset by the lower domestic fuel prices. Lower global commodity prices and low domestic fuel prices also cushion inflationary pressures. The movement of the ringgit partly reflects its role as an adjustment mechanism for the economy in response to the lower commodity prices. We know that when we have external developments, three adjustments can take place: prices, domestic prices, domestic demand, and the exchange rate. And it's very important that all three adjust rather than over-reliance on one to adjust. And therefore, we have the effects of it dispersed throughout the economy. So Bank Negara Malaysia's role is to ensure the orderly functioning of the market to avoid disruptions to trade and business activities. And this is most important because we are a trading economy. Fluctuations in the level of the exchange rate and international reserves are expected outcomes in any managed float exchange rate regime. And the recent ringgit depreciation and decline in international reserves are expected during periods of capital outflows. During episodes of capital flow reversals, the ringgit exchange rate fluctuation functions as a shock absorber. And this is important. Exchange rate adjustments are part of the shock absorber. The principal role of building reserves as a buffer is such that it would be unwound to deal with the over-adjustment and overshooting of the exchange rate. This is, of course, what we don't want to see, overshooting take place. During previous periods of capital outflows, we have seen reserves fall by a more significant magnitude than what we are seeing now. During the global financial crisis, when deleveraging was taking place, Malaysia's reserves fell to 87.7 billion US dollars before rising again to 136.3 billion US dollars in August of 2011. Therefore, we will set about again to rebuild our reserves. Currently, the level of international reserves remains ample to facilitate international transactions to take place without any disruption. Despite the capital outflows and depreciation in the ringgit, conditions in the domestic markets have remained orderly, and the bulk of the recent outflows have largely been driven by the non-residents' unwinding of the Bank Negara monetary notes. This is the BNN. Outflows through this instrument have ensured that the domestic financial markets are not significantly impacted. And this can be seen from the liquidity conditions both in the bond and equity market. In the bond market, the liquidity remains stable, as reflected by the monthly average trading in the government bond market, which remains above the 7-year average of 50 billion ringgit. Sustained demand from investors has also resulted in the bond yields to remain broadly on a declining trend. And between January to June this year, the 5-year MGS bond yield declined only by 17 basis points compared to the 5-year regional bond yields, which increased by 29 to 87 basis points. Despite the volatility in the equity market has increased, trading activities in the market remains above historical average amid continued support from domestic institutional investors. And net financing through the banking system and the PDS market expanded at a stable rate of 8.3% as at end June. And the growth of outstanding banking system loans remained relatively stable. In particular, the growth of outstanding loans to SMEs continued to be strong, growing at 17.2% as at end June. And the loans disbursed by the banking system to SMEs was also higher at 63.8 billion ringgit. And this is important because SMEs are an important sector in our economy. And the increase in funds raised in the capital market during the quarter, together with sustained loan disbursements, continued to provide support to economic activity. Domestic financial stability continues to be preserved despite all the volatility around us in the global and domestic financial markets during the quarter. Malaysian financial institutions remain sound and well capitalized with strong liquidity buffers, and this has supported favorable funding conditions for businesses and households. Financial market volatility eased but remain elevated, driven by developments in Greece and uncertainties on the timing of the normalization of monetary conditions in the United States. Sentiments in the domestic market improved in early July 2015 with the affirmation of Malaysia's credit ratings and revision in its outlook. Subsequent developments in China in these recent days have also generated some international volatility. The annual expansion of household debt sustained its moderating trend over 2 consecutive years now to 8.3%. And as you know, all the questions revolved around our domestic household debt prior to that, and we had implemented many macroprudential measures, and we are seeing the outcome of these measures now over the 2 consecutive years, and the trend at 8.3% is a more sustainable trend. This was driven by the slower growth in outstanding credit cards and balances and financing for the purchase of securities in particular. Growth in personal financing by non-bank lenders was also lower at 3.8%. And the annual growth in financing for the purchase of houses remains strong at 11.9%. So most of this slowing down of household borrowing is mainly for personal loans, but for houses, purchase of houses, it still remains strong at 11.9%. And households continue to be supported by stable income growth and employment conditions. Financial buffers are strong, with financial assets sustained in excess of 2 times of debt. And overall, the debt servicing capacity is further supported by improved loan affordability assessments by financial institutions. Aggregate leverage of businesses remains low and stable at 41.3%, Businesses continue to be well placed to service their debt, with interest coverage ratio improving further to 6.5 times. And this was led by domestic-oriented industries, particularly the construction and infrastructure and utilities industry, which benefited from lower input costs such as fuel and transportation expenses. And during the quarter, external borrowings increased by 11.1%, and however this growth was mainly driven by one single large foreign currency bond issuance by a domestic conglomerate. And excluding this one issuance, external debt remained at much slower rate, increase at a much slower rate of 3% in the first quarter. On aggregate, developments in commodity prices and the ringgit exchange rates continue to have limited impact on the debt servicing capacity of most Malaysian businesses. Turning now to the banking sector. The banking sector's external exposure continued to expand during the quarter in line with their regional operations and trade activities. The bulk of such exposures are in Asia, which accounts for 61.4% of the total external assets and 65% of total external liabilities of banks. And during the first quarter, external assets of banks grew at a much faster pace relative to external liabilities, and this resulted in lower net external liability position of 110 billion ringgit as at end first quarter 2015. External liabilities are driven by deposit placements, custodian-related activities, and capital funds from parent entities. And the banking sector operations continue to be domestically funded in the form of ringgit deposits. And there's no reliance on external funds. So most of our bank's activities are based on their funding from deposits, that is, domestic deposits. The banking institution also have limited exposure to the current challenging economic and financial conditions in Greece. During the quarter, the total exposure to Europe accounts for only 9.5% of total external assets and 4% of total external liabilities, with the bulk of the total exposure mainly being from the EU 3 countries, that is UK, Germany, and France. Forward-looking indicators point towards a continued expansion in global and domestic economic activity. Global manufacturing production is weaker, but indicators remain expansionary, indicating continued growth. And trade activity in the coming quarters. For the domestic economy, average wages continue to grow amid increasing but still moderate inflation. Together with stable employment and continued access to financing, these indicators suggest fundamentals that will support private consumption activity. Additionally, planned investment by private sector remains positive as indicated by the forward-looking indicators. Going forward, global growth is projected to remain moderate. Growth improvements in the advanced economies are expected to remain modest. In the region, growth will be underpinned by domestic demand amid weak export performance. Downside risk remains as international financial markets continue to face volatility following increased concerns over developments in Europe and continued policy uncertainty in several major advanced economies. The Malaysian economy, however, has a diversified economic structure supported by strong fundamentals to withstand these risks and challenges. While the exchange rate depreciated may be unsettling, the impact on growth and inflation will be contained, mitigated by resilient domestic and external fundamentals. The orderly functioning of the financial markets will continue to preserve domestic financial stability and facilitate the necessary economic adjustments. Financial intermediation will continue to support our economy. In our assessment, the Malaysian economy is projected to remain resilient in the face of this challenging environment and is expected to continue to remain on a steady growth path. Thank you, and this concludes the presentation. It would be appreciated if we remain focused, at least in the first part of this press conference, on the economic development.
Governor,
yes.
Hi. This is Wai Sing from Bloomberg News.
Yes.
You mentioned about the impact of the ringgit depreciation being manageable.
Yes.
In light of the recent sharp declines, does Bank Negara see any need to take any measures to restore some stability? And sorry, can I just ask all the questions at once?
Yes.
And do you think also that that you expect some stability to return to the market soon, the FX market? And last of all, could you also address speculation that you will not be seeing out your term in office, that you'll be leaving before your term ends? Thank you.
First of all, I want to emphasize that during this kind of period of volatility, it's not what the measures that we do now that will allow us to withstand and ride out this period of volatility. It is the measures that what we have done before. And what are these measures? Well, the measures to restructure our economy. Before we were export-led, and we promoted domestic demand, and in the form of consumption and investment. And these are what is driving our economy. I believe something like it accounts for 90% of our growth is domestic demand. So this economic restructuring and transformation has been critical. Then what we did to develop our capital market, the bond market in particular. Before we were bank-centric, and now we have a more developed bond market that's more than 100% of GDP. The fact is that this volatility is now dispersed throughout our financial system. These are some of the measures that we took, and in the areas of vulnerability, household debt and so on. These are the areas that we addressed well before this volatility is taking place. And this volatility is beyond our control. For example, the drop in commodity prices. Oil prices have dropped by 55% and so on. And therefore, for us, we have done what we need to do to allow us to withstand. We built up our reserves to levels that can assist in absorbing this shock. Your second question was on?
Whether you think the volatility and the ringgit market will subside soon?
This volatility is likely to continue until there's certainty on the policy direction that's going to be taken in the major economies like the US and Europe. And once the normalization takes place, just like once tapering, before it happened, there was this volatility. But once the tapering actually commenced, the markets stabilize. And we believe that once the normalization actually takes place, financial markets will stabilize. Financial markets, in anticipation of any change in direction of policies, in particular of major economies, tend to be susceptible to increased volatility. Then the conditions in the energy market remains uncertain. It depends on supply, whether the supply that comes on stream is going to increase, and then if it also depends on demand. If the economies slow down and there will be a slowing demand, then you will see further volatility in this market. So this is what we need to be prepared for. And just like a country prepares itself for this volatility, businesses have to better understand these developments and prepare themselves. So the volatility is likely to continue for several months more. The last question relates to my term in office. I certainly will remain in office until my term ends. And my term ends, of course, it's a 5-year term, and it ends next year.
Hi, Governor. Esther from The Edge.
Yes.
So you mentioned that the growth of the economy will be driven by domestic demand.
Yes.
So, but which component in the domestic demand itself that will actually help to drive growth? Given that currently consumer sentiment is a bit weak, so is business sentiment.
Well, despite weakness in sentiment, the growth has still been favorable at 6.4%. Consumption has been growing at 6.4%. And this is significant. We actually expected it to be lower because there was a lot of front-loading of consumption in the first quarter. We thought it would be lower, but we were pleased to see that it wasn't too far from the long-term average of 6.7, 6.8%.
Will it be the same going forward?
Pardon?
Will it be the same going forward, like for the next, second half of this year? Is
Well,
it your expectation as well?
This has to be monitored closely. The factors affecting consumption are, for example, income and wages, and this has been rising. And job security is another factor affecting consumption, and so far we are not seeing unemployment or retrenchment increasing, and therefore these are positive factors. And the fact that access to financing continues, both to SMEs and to for house demand for purchase of houses increased significantly, and when people purchase houses, there is consumption, purchase of many other items related, and therefore these are the factors. And the fact is also that oil prices have declined, and consumers benefit from this. Their petrol price declines, so their purchasing power increases. So all these factors support sustained consumption demand. And then in the case of investment, there was completion of certain investment projects, and there was also some slowing down by public sector enterprises. But based on approval numbers for investment activities, these have not declined. In fact, they have increased, and therefore our anticipation is that investment activity will recover from these current levels, and therefore this is what will support our growth going forward.
Pray you recover quickly. Just to recap your question on the ringgit.
Yes.
So, you're not planning any specific measures like what we did in the last financial crisis, like a tag or capital control? Could you just elaborate?
No, I want to categorically emphasize that we do not intend to peg the currency. The fact that we have a flexible exchange rate regime helps our country to adjust. Because if the exchange rate doesn't adjust, then prices and demand has to adjust. And therefore, these external developments, the impact of these external developments will affect us much more than having the impact dispersed throughout for exchange rate adjustments, demand adjustments, and price adjustments. So it's very important to have a flexible exchange rate regime.
Is there a period that you think these uncertainties, especially on the ringgit, will continue? As many Malaysians have children abroad. It's hurting the man on the street.
Yes.
They reckon that this could be because of the continued uncertainties in the country, the political uncertainties. Do you have a time frame as to what could be done or what needs to be done in the country?
Well, there are many things that can be done. First of all, there's an export cabinet committee that has been established so that our export sector continues to be strong, and this is important. And then so that our external balance remains in surplus. And this is a strength for Malaysia, and it's a strength that will support our currency, because if we had a deficit, then that would apply greater pressure. The fact that we have diversified our economy away from the oil and gas sector, 80% of our economy comprise of services and the manufacturing sector, and this is important because these sectors continue to grow and strongly, and this supports our economy. If we were over-dependent on oil and gas, then this would have problems. So these are all areas that we are working very hard to keep our fundamentals strong and to keep our economic structure resilient. This is what we can do. We cannot react with knee-jerk measures. We cannot have knee-jerk reactions, because any knee-jerk reactions will be temporary in their effects. And therefore, given that this kind of volatility is likely to continue, then we have to brace ourselves and prepare. And that is why it's important to have savings so that we can withstand this period. I believe that once the external environment improves, and on the domestic front, when we sort out all the domestic issues, then the currency will better reflect its fundamentals.
Thank you, Country.
Hi, Country.
Yes. Yes, and I did want to say, I was reminded here that we are not introducing capital controls as well. We've moved on from that because we have a more developed financial system, more developed financial markets that are larger and able to absorb this kind of volatility. We've also strengthened our financial intermediaries, and they are better able to cope with it. All right, thank you. Yes, the next question here. Yes.
Country.
From BFM 89.9, you mentioned several times domestic issues that we need to sort out. Could you specify what these are and what sort of time frame you give yourself to do this, and basically how urgent?
Yes, I understand your question very well. I'd like to I'd like to focus on the economic and financial developments first, and then we'll come back to your question. Yes.
Country. My name is Alex. I'm a.
Where are you? All right. Yes. Where are you? Where's Alex?
Here. Hi.
Yes. All right.
Hi, Country. My name is Alex. I'm from Malaysian Reserve. There's some concern about GLCs that are raising funds in US dollar, suku, or in bonds overseas, because people think that if these GLCs had to repay the funds in foreign currencies, that would increase the outflow of our ringgit. And put further pressure on our currency. So, such as, for example, Tenaga Nasional, which is planning 2.7 billion US dollars this year, So our question is, have you ever considered some sort of financial controls to at least prevent this sort of raising of foreign funds overseas, at least for 3 months during this volatile period? Thanks.
There's an expectation that these large corporations have the ability to make the assessment. They need to consider those, of course, that have foreign income or foreign assets. Then, of course, this is a natural hedge for them. And Malaysia has liberalized its environment to allow for hedging of unlimited amount and unlimited time frame. So these are all considerations that our foreign, our multinationals and our GLCs and other corporations take into account when they enter into such foreign debt. And therefore, we believe that they make these assessments. So sometimes they require raising of foreign funds because they have expenditure in foreign currency, investments or other purchases of equipment and so on that they may need, and therefore they require this foreign currency. But they have to manage their foreign exchange exposures, is the advice that is given.
Tan Sri, sorry, Prasanna from The Sun. Can I just ask you, earlier you mentioned that you expect a few more months of volatility. What is the worst case scenario? Could you give us an idea of how much can our economy withstand in terms of external reserves and our current account balance? Could you give us a worst case scenario and how we will be able to, withstand that?
Well, let me just say that during the Asian financial crisis, we withstood it for 1.5 years. And then our reserves were not depleted, and that is why we were not under the IMF program, because we continue to be able to meet our foreign exchange exposures. That was in a very extreme circumstances. We are not in that kind of extreme circumstances now. And the point is, if we did suffer any setbacks, like when the global financial crisis happened, yes, we were affected. We're not immune to external developments. But we have demonstrated time and again that we were able to rebound quickly from this, any setback. And I have that confidence, even more so than previously, because of our fundamentals, because of our high degree of resilience, that we will be able to bounce back quickly from any setback that we might experience. Yes.
Governor, Zakwan from Reuters. Yes. Yeah, you can see me, yes?
Yes.
On China's move to devalue its currency, could you elaborate on to what extent it's affected the ringgit in Malaysia? And is there a plan for Malaysia to address this in any way?
No, there's none. China is adjusting to this international environment, and in fact, its currency has adjusted much less than everyone else. So I believe that it is taking into account these two recent adjustments. It has just cumulatively since August of 2014, when other currencies began adjusting, and we have adjusted since then by about to the US dollar, that is, because we should actually not just look at the US dollar, but against the US dollar, we adjusted by about 20%, and China cumulatively only about 3 or 4%. And so this is not significant, but it surprised the market, and therefore the market will adjust to these changes. And if they look at it in perspective, there shouldn't be an overreaction to this move. And if it's good for China, it's good for the rest of us as well.
Tan Sri, hi. Jacqueline. Hi.
Jacqueline?
Here.
Yes.
Hi, from Bloomberg Television.
Yes.
Tan Sri, you talk about fundamentals here, but exports have fallen 4 out of 6 months this year. Consumer sentiment index is at a 6-year low. We've got foreign investors net selling Malaysian equities for 14 to 15 straight weeks. What's your take on that? At this point in time, Tan Sri, we are so susceptible and so sensitive to every domestic and global factor out there. So what is your take on that? How much will the ringgit sustain?
Well, if we look at our conditions, we are still in what we have described as steady growth path, that is between 4 to 6%, and our growth for the second quarter is 4.9%, and therefore we expect to remain in this growth range for the remaining part of this year. And this is one of the better performing economies. So the fact that we are living through this highly challenging environment, that we've been able to experience a growth of 4.9% during the quarter. There's been no disruption in financial intermediation. The fact that household loans is growing by 8.3%, and the fact that SME loans are growing by 17%. So business is still going on. Yes, there are some unsettling developments, but the point is we will implement measures to ensure access to financing, ensure that exports continue to grow, and foreign direct inflow, foreign direct investment continues, and this is taking place. The reason for our exports to decline or slow down is because of global demand. Global demand has been moderating. Even the IMF has revised global growth downwards about 4 or 5 times over these recent few years. But nevertheless, we are seeing economies like the US and UK and so on, those economies that have a close linkage, where we have a close linkage with them, is improving. So these are the positive prospects on the horizon. If the US economy continues to improve, and the UK and so on, and Europe, then we will see conditions stabilizing. So yes, we acknowledge that this is unsettling times that create challenges for everyone. But it's during these times that the strength that we have built, the foundations that we have built, will take us through. If we didn't have a surplus to begin with, then we would be a country of twin deficits, and we would be vulnerable. But the fact is, even our fiscal deficit has shown signs of improvement. It was, I believe, a few years ago, something like 5.8% deficit, and it's almost half that now, at 3.2%. And so everyone is working hard and to ensure that we have these fundamentals. And the private sector has to do its part as well. And that is why we said during the good times, you have to build your buffers. Even for us, we built up our reserves to about 131 billion, I believe it, 136 billion. And therefore, now, of course, when we have the outflows, we built it up when there were surges of inflows. And therefore, when these inflows are reversed, then we see a decline. But we will rebuild again. And why do we have the confidence that we will rebuild? Well, for one, given that we will have a surplus in our current account, but secondly, because we are a profit center. The whole of Asia, in particular ASEAN, has been a growth center in the global economy, and therefore funds will continue to look at our economies and our financial markets because of this fact that we are an important growth center, ASEAN and the greater Asia, in the global economy. therefore it is unlikely that we will not be on the radar screen of investors.
Hello, Tan Sri.
Okay, who is that?
Over here, Tan Sri. Jason here from Dow Jones.
I'll come back to you.
Basically, I just want to find out about the the effect of the ringgit's depreciation. You mentioned just now there's higher import costs and there's also benefit in terms of higher earnings. So I'm just wondering what's the net effect of the ringgit's fall? Is it actually a net benefit or is it a negative for the economy? That's first question. And second question is the reserves have, as you noted, have fallen quite a bit. So I'm just wondering if if the central bank is still comfortable with the current levels, whether there's need to continue to use the foreign reserve to at least smooth out the ringgit's volatility or something like that. Just wondering.
This net effect is still being monitored very closely because there are positive and negative effects, and we need to see not only the first round effects but the second and third round effects. So given that this phenomenon is just taking place now, we are monitoring it closely. Of course, those companies that have built up buffers and have natural hedge and so on, despite being affected, the impact on their business is manageable to them. And for example, the government has very low external debt, so to them they are less affected. And so all this has to be meticulously examined, and we believe that given that our external debt has been low relative to others, because we have developed a domestic market for fundraising, so that has been another important element that has allowed us that most of the debt is ringgit denominated. And the fact is that when they say, because of the new definition of external debt, includes ringgit denominated debt that is held by non-residents. And yes, sometimes there is a sell-off when they unwind their position, but it does not have an impact on the ringgit because it is ringgit denominated. And then we have our own large institutional investors that step in to demand, and that is why our bond market has remained an equity market relatively more stable than others because of it. So these are some of the important things that will see us through this period of uncertainty and volatility. Yes, very much so. We held reserves way beyond the level that is needed for our country, and therefore the current level is well within levels that we are still comfortable with to take us through the next few months and into next year.
Just one question for me on the GDP. You mentioned just now you will remain in
and I just did want to add to that, that the fact that we have a surplus on our current account, the fact that we continue to have a steady inflow of foreign direct investment is also supporting that. If it was not the case, then it would be more challenging. But the fact that it is not. All right, your next question.
Sorry, you mentioned just now the economy to remain in growth range of 4 to 6%. Did I catch that correctly? 4 to 6%?
We said that long time ago.
Okay.
That was our definition because people asked us, what do you mean when you say that you're on a steady growth path? So we said between 4 to 6% is being on a steady growth path. Yes. No, there was one question there.
Yeah, morning. Shanmugam from Star.
Yes.
The the trading of MGS papers has spiked up quite a bit, and the yields also have gone up, indicating that there's more selling. Question one is, do you expect the yields to rise further, considering that there is a possibility of the US rate hike next month? And question two is, what is the percentage, latest percentage figures or in absolute amount that foreigners holding these local papers? Thank you.
Right. As you know that most of the unwinding was in the Bank Negara bills, and of course this doesn't affect directly the bond market. Secondly, on the non-resident holding of MGS is about 40%. But the point is, every time there's a sell-off by these non-residents, the likes of our own pension funds and investment corporations and the insurance industry, which is now much larger, step in to buy. And as a result, the trend actually of the yields has been declining. But has it increased?
Yes. I think the increase is, if you look at the volatility of the MGS, it's not that volatile compared to the other markets. And one should expect the MGS to be repriced, simply because the market expects that the US will normalize the interest rate. If the MGS yields doesn't increase, then it should be a worry, because there must be something wrong with the pricing mechanism. So far, the pricing mechanism has worked very well.
Tan Sri, Jagdev here from the Star. I just want to know, what is your estimate on the short-term impact of a persistent depreciation of the ringgit on the economy and also on businesses? And the second part of the question is there a shortage of US dollars in the system?
There is no shortage of US dollars in the system. And the market continues to function. There's been no disruption in any of our financial markets, and liquidity remains ample, and the price mechanism in these markets continue to function efficiently. So in terms of the impact on the financial markets, in any destabilizing and disruptive manner has not occurred.
Currency notes, the currency notes itself.
Yes, there's currency notes also available in stock, so there's no shortage.
Hi, Tan Sri.
Tan Sri.
There's one question in front here. Yes.
Hi, this is live from Oriental Daily. Tan Sri, just from Oriental Daily. Tan Sri, just now you have said your contract is until next year, right?
Yes.
So, were you willing to stay in the office if being asked that, if there is an extension of your contract, were you willing to stay? Thank you.
Right now, I have said that I plan to write a book upon my retirement. I would have been in office for 16 years. I've already done most of what I wanted to do. And one of the things is, I believe that Bank Negara is a solid institution, and therefore it will go on and rise to greater heights. Yes. Yes, that's correct. And I would have completed 16 years in office. And also 35 years of service to Bank Negara and to the country.
Tan Sri, this is Liu from Singchu Daily here.
All right, all right, yes.
Tan Sri, I know you want the question focused on economics, but I got one question related to 1MDB. Tan Sri,
can we take that question later? Let me ask, is there any more economic
Yes.
financial, yes.
Yes, Medical Officer Cindy from
Um,
PH.
yes.
Can you comment specifically on the worries surrounding the 1.1 time short-term external debt cover? They've cited this as those who cited this on capital controls. They say it's unlikely, but they don't totally
Yes,
rule it out.
highly
because-
unlikely.
Yeah, highly unlikely. Yet these people still say that they don't rule it out because of the current volatility in the entire market globally.
Well, truly. And therefore, it is not only Malaysia that is affected. It's not
Correct.
unique to the ringgit. Everyone around the world is affected by these developments. So why should we have such extreme measures when we're not in an extreme situation?
What would you call an extreme situation in today's? Because there's a lot of worry, and they think.
Okay.
Yeah.
An extreme situation would be is that we are plummeted into a serious recession and so on. Okay. And we don't expect to be in that kind of situation. Yes, and why do we not expect it? It's because we have restructured our economy. There are many positive developments that are occurring in the economy and so on. And if there was no access to credit, and you have 17% growth to SMEs, and before SMEs couldn't get any access to financing. So you have to take it in a total perspective to see what the circumstances are.
Could you re-emphasize your the worries on the 1.1 time external debt cover?
Yes, because you have to, this is short-term debt, and I've already mentioned it, that these are intercompany loans and loans by the banking sector, and they have matching assets against these liabilities, and therefore this is not a concern. This is like our banks. They fund their activities, I think 90% is from domestic deposits and not short-term external financing. So in that sense, we are not concerned at all regarding this.
And just to give a sense of perspective, the same number for Hong Kong is 0.4, for Singapore is 0.2, for Indonesia is 2.5, for Thailand is 2.9. Now, the reason is because of our size of our financial market, especially the bond market. It's huge compared to, say, 1997, 98. So that shows the reason why our short-term versus GDP have moved somewhat.
Yes. So this comes with the maturity of our financial system and financial markets. The fact is that at about that time in 98, I believe our bond market was something like 35% of GDP. Now it's about 110% of GDP. It's one of the most developed, certainly in Southeast Asia.
267 billion versus 1.1 trillion.
Yes. So because of these kind of numbers, so it has to be, the environment is very dynamic, and therefore it has to be seen in that perspective.
That's right. Just one more question.
Yes.
So, who will be your successor if you leave the position, or did the Bank Negara look for any candidates?
You know, when we introduced our legislation, the Central Banking Act, we rewrote the Central Banking Act after 50 years of being established as a central bank, and this was in 2009. The bank was established in 1959. Yes, 1959. So 50 years after being established, we rewrote the act. And now we have a greater role for the board of the central bank, which is made up of the majority of which made up private sector individuals. aside from myself, which is chairman of the board, but my 3 deputies are also members of the board, but the others are made up of private sector individuals. One of the, there's also a governance committee. Of course, we've always had an audit committee of the board. We have a risk management oversight of committee of the board, but we have a governance committee. This governance committee will evaluate candidates. In fact, every time my term has been renewed, they evaluate my performance as a governor. So to see whether I should be renewed and so on. So in this particular case, they will evaluate the candidate or candidates, whether from internal and or external. And I believe that we have strong candidates from internal as well to head the central bank. We have succession planning 5 levels down. That is to show how solid the central bank is. That means the deputy governor, the governor first, the deputy governor, the assistant governor, the head of department, which is called director, and the deputy to the head of department, which is called deputy director. There's succession planning for each one of them. Isn't it right? Yes. This is our assistant governor in charge of HR here at Hari there. So we are a solid organization, and I have full confidence that it will continue to do as well and stand up for the rights and respect that has been accorded to us by the people of the country.
So there's solid internal candidates to be the next governor, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Tan Sri.
Where are you?
Tan Sri, Mani here.
Yes.
Tan Sri, there's been a lot of allegations made against the central bank and also against you since the day you all joined the special task force headed by the former Attorney General. Is there something that you can explain?
There's no truth to these allegations against me personally and against the bank. There's no truth to it. And many of these allegations are made by anonymous. We will seek out to identify who they are and take further action, legal action on them. Right now, we don't know who they are. We have some idea and follow-up lead to who they are, but they have been anonymous so far. Yes.
Could you question yourself or any executive of the bank as they said the word?
Yes, they did. They questioned 7 of our officers.
Including yourself?
Not yet, because I just came back. I just came back from actually quite a long journey. I was in the United States, and I came back the day before yesterday. Yes.
Tan Sri. The leakage of the banking details, how does it affect the banking industry?
It has not affected, it says, how does it affect the banking industry? It has not affected the banking industry. Pardon? There's if there's any breach of secrecy, action will be taken against those individuals that breach this secrecy act and legislation. So, if we know who did the leak, there will be action against those individuals that participated in disclosing such information. We want to give the Malaysian public that assurance that their deposits are safe and that no one can go and look into their deposits. Not even the central bank can look into the deposits unless they have done something wrong. And the only way that we would know is that the banks are required to report to us that they see some suspicious activity in this account. Then the banks will report to us. or if the account holder reports to us. Otherwise, even the central bank cannot look into your personal accounts.
Tan Sri, just sorry to be rude. Can I ask, were you all informed about the 2.6 billion money that was into the Prime Minister's account? Were the central bank informed about that by M-Bank?
I have to be very careful what I say, that it has to be within the legal, it has to be within the confines of the law. Otherwise, the moment that I step out of this door, I will face arrest for talking about an individual account. Yes. And I'm sure you don't want that to happen.
That's Sri.
Just let me read out what I can say. Without getting into details, because they're ongoing investigations, let me just say that Bank Negara has shared all the information that we have relating to any accounts with the relevant enforcement authority, because we are not the enforcement authority for any of those wrongdoings. And therefore, we share the information with other enforcement agencies. So while I cannot share it with you, because you're not an enforcement authority, Bank Negara has already shared all this information that is provided to us, whether it's provided by our local banks or our counterparts in other countries all over the world, then these enforcement authorities have that information.
Hello, Tan Sri. Jason here from Dow Jones again. Since the special task force has been effectively disbanded, I'm just wondering if the central bank could provide an update on the investigation on, since the central bank is investigating it, so can you provide us an update?
Yes, the bank has actually completed its investigation related to transactions by the 1MDB. That is the question that was asked just now. And of course, our investigation we already issued out a statement of what our investigation was related to. It was related to all those areas that are under the purview of the central bank and under our legislation. All right, let me read it to be very clear to you. The central bank has completed its investigations which are related to transactions by 1MDB that are subject to Bank Negara's approval under our legislation. And the bank has submitted its investigation papers to the Attorney General with the recommendations for the appropriate enforcement action. And I want to reiterate again that the bank is prohibited by law from publicly discussing any details of its investigations. And if we are called by the PAC, that is the only other avenue where the bank will be able to respond to questions on this investigation.
Thanks, Sri. Pauline from Business Times, Singapore.
Where's the question from here?
Tan Sri, you've been saying for many, many months that the ringgit is significantly undervalued and it continues to fall.
Yes.
Would you say there's a confidence crisis, especially among foreign investors?
If we look at all the other currencies happening all the other currencies in financial systems around us and other parts of the world, they are all facing the same challenge. For us, it may have been more because we have domestic issues that has generated uncertainty. And there's effort on several quarters to reduce this uncertainty. So once this uncertainty is removed or reduced, then I believe that we will be very similar to others. But the fact that we have internationally the prospect of normalization of interest rates in the United States and uncertainty of when that will happen, and we have oil prices coming off, doesn't make the impact of this depreciation unique to Malaysia. But certainly on our part, every effort needs to be done to bring a solution, a resolution to the issues that are confronting us on the domestic front. All right, the gentleman at the back there. There was a gentleman.
Hi, Tan Sri.
Yes.
Yeah, it was me just now.
Yeah.
Alex again. I just wanted to know if Bank Negara is still involved in any sort of investigation after you have submitted the relevant details to the enforcement officials. Thank you.
Yes, of course, we look at the areas that are under our purview, and the areas that are under our purview relates to the financial institutions' compliance to our rules and regulations and to our laws. And therefore, our investigations will be confined to the areas that are under our purview. And of course, we give full cooperation to the other enforcement agencies insofar as we have information that relates to the overall investigation. Yeah. All right.
When you say domestic front issues, are you referring to the low oil prices or commodity prices? Or the political uncertainties? Or the political uncertainties that is happening in the country within UMNO, calls for Najib to step down. Are you referring to those things? Thank you.
The commodity prices and oil prices is a global phenomenon, and it's beyond our control. What we can have control on those, the impact of those developments is the diversification of our economy, the diversification of sources of revenue for the government, and so on. And those are the actions that we have already taken. It's not what we can do now, but what we have done previously to put us in a better position to manage that kind of challenge. When I'm referring to, I'm not referring to political developments because I believe that there's a political process to resolve that, and that is something that the central bank stays totally out of because we have, that is not our role. Our role is to deliver to the Malaysian people stable and sustainable growth for our economy and a solid financial system, which I believe that we are delivering and will continue to deliver. But what I'm referring to is if there's any highly leveraged entity and uncertainty associated with what is going to happen to it, that is something that can be resolved and should be resolved quickly so that it doesn't generate uncertainty.
Sorry, Tan Sri, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to clarify a little. When you mentioned that you have submitted the investigation papers to the Attorney General, are you referring to the previous Attorney General or the current Attorney General? And have you had any communications with the new, current one?
The current one.
To the current one?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Tan Sri, at the back, Eileen from Associated Press. Tan Sri, can I just clarify again, when exactly did you complete your investigation and when were the papers submitted? And you mentioned just now that you're not the enforcement agency on any of these wrongdoings. So can you confirm that your investigation has showed that there were wrongdoings by certain parties? And although you can't give us details, but can you at least just highlight some your general findings? Thank you.
Our investigations were completed this week, and the papers were submitted this week.
Is this investigation papers on the money transfer to Prime Minister Najib?
No. This is on 1MDB. Because we issued a statement earlier in May, was it? In June, that we had already initiated a formal investigations. There were informal investigations prior to that. And therefore, that investigation has been completed.
Are you also having a separate probe on the alleged money transfer into Prime Minister Najib's account as political donations?
That is not under our purview. That is, there are other enforcement agencies. Is under the purview of other enforcement agencies. You see, relating to 1MDB, we have already highlighted that we gave them approvals to make investments. And we clearly stated the very specific areas of that investigation. And we are accountable for the approvals that we gave to them for their investment activities and their, essentially their international investment activities. So that investigation is now completed, and I'm not at liberty to discuss the details of that investigation.
Tan Sri, it's Lukman here from Berita Harian. I would like to go back with the questions put forward by the BFM reporters. You mentioned about the domestic issues that has been influencing our market sentiments. Could you name a few which domestic issues you are talking about, and to what degree from 1 to 100 it actually influenced the market sentiments, and which actually took the limelight of all the sentiments? I mean, for example, the 1MDB one. So, thank you.
The market is so complex, and therefore there are many factors that affect it. And whenever there is uncertainty, that means uncertainty, people don't know what the outcome will be. Like we don't know, for example, when the US is going to commence raising rates. We don't know that. That affects the international financial markets. It's acknowledged. If you switch on your television set and show Bloomberg and CNBC and any news wire, they will continually discuss this every day about this uncertainty, and it generates volatility. Now, you know when there's uncertainty in the domestic front, and I don't need to enumerate what is generating uncertainty. And everyone is highlighting that if you have a highly leveraged entity, that creates some uncertainty. And once that a solution is provided for that uncertainty, then conditions will stabilize. That's how it works. So, Bank Negara, for example, the staff worked round the clock and through weekends so that we could complete our investigations and therefore contribute to some of the degree of certainty with respect to the entity concerned. And that is all that I can say. Otherwise, I'll be in contravention of the law, and steps will be taken against me for talking about it.
Tan Sri,
Yes.
I'm Shannon from the Straits Times. I just need to ask very directly, has the central bank conducted any investigations into the Prime Minister, and if it's been completed, or is any ongoing right now? Thank you.
Right. All I can say is this is not under our purview. Actions that relate to the central bank only looks at the contraventions to our law, and we assist other enforcement agencies that look into or investigate contraventions to their laws, and this is all we can do. We cannot take actions against any individual or any business in areas that our law doesn't give us powers to do so. But if these other enforcement agencies come to us and ask us for our assistance because it involves developments in our sector, we provide this, but we are not the one that conducts the investigation, and we are not the one who takes actions, because we don't have the powers to do so.
Dr. Zeti, may I know the position with regards to Bank Negara, say hypothetically, huge sum of money, in US dollars coming to the country and is declared as political donation. What is the position? Is it a sufficient? Obviously, the Bank Negara will be alerted. The bank will inform.
Yes, the banks are supposed to inform us.
Yeah, but if it's a political donation,
Okay, I'm corrected. The financial institution is supposed to conduct due diligence, and if everything is in order, then they will not inform us. But if they suspect something is suspicious, then it's called
Suspicious transaction report.
Suspicious transactions report, STR, will be submitted to Bank Negara, and then we will become aware of it. But otherwise, the central bank, will not be aware of it.
What is the position if it's a political donation? Is it any amount is okay? Is it any amount is okay?
I think the law is very clear on this. We have the AMLA. The AMLA faces specific responsibilities on the reporting institutions to conduct what we call due diligence. It's up to them to look at, the source of the money and to whether it befits, what has been declared to the banks, if there are anything suspicious. If they think that there is suspicious, then the law compels them to submit to us what we call an STR. It is only with the STR reported to Bank Negara Malaysia that Bank Negara is allowed to share such information with the relevant law enforcement agencies. Bank Negara has no access to the conduct of specific accounts. The law, even like what the Governor has said, prohibits Bank Negara to inquire specifically into an account, a specific account. So we are only in the know if such reports are submitted to us. And the responsibility is placed on the reporting institutions. It is not Bank Negara's job because we do not have access to the kind of information that is needed to conduct that due diligence.
Tan Sri, yes. The market concerns on your health. Yeah, here.
Oh,
Tan Sri, the market concern on your healthy condition recently. Yeah, so do you have anything to say?
No, I don't have any medical illness. I was told by the doctor that my heart is very strong. I was also told by the doctor that my arteries are very clean. So I've taken many examinations, and they couldn't find anything yet. All I have is before I traveled to the US for a pre-scheduled meeting that was taking place, and that I already had a cough, and therefore long distance travel wasn't entirely very good for that. But I arrived back the day before yesterday, and there's some still lingering, especially if I talk too much, and the cough comes back.
And so,
Oh, right. Actually, when the rumors came out, I was giving a luncheon address by more than 200 people. It was the European Chambers of Commerce, and it was a luncheon address on the Tuesday. The rumors came out on the Monday, and that I had a heart attack. It wasn't true, of course. I'm on absolutely no medication. I've never taken any medication, and I wish that I remembered to take the multivitamins, which I always forget to take.
Okay, great to hear that.
Tan Sri.
Yes.
Tan Sri Mani here. 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 Tan Sri.
Yes.
See, coming back to Mel's question, was the STR report made by any of the banks?
We are investigating on the compliance of the financial institutions to this requirement, and that is all that I can say at the moment.
Sorry, Tan Sri. Elson from Bloomberg TV.
Yes.
On the OPR, I know you have maintained that no capital controls will be imposed at the moment. There's no extreme circumstances. What would change Bank Negara's view on maintaining the OPR? And are there other measures other than the capital controls, such as perhaps FX controls?
No, there's no measures of that nature that are being looked into at this point in time, because we believe that our financial system has been able to intermediate this volatile financial flows.
Tan Sri.
Yes.
Shanmugam. On the question of 1MDB and the investigations into its transactions that you have completed, issues related to 1MDB has been raised many times previously in this room, and I'm just quite curious. This investigation started somewhere in May, but the
No. Well before that. It was what we call an informal investigation, that we monitored them, we engaged with them for a few years actually, and we wrote reports on it and submitted reports on them. Yes, because you see, we have, as you may know a lot about our Monetary Policy Committee, because we issue out a statement after every meeting. But we have a Financial Stability Committee, and we only talk about it in once a year when we release the annual report, the Financial Stability Report. And this committee looks into, amongst other things, what are the risks to our financial system. And amongst the many areas, because the meeting takes a whole day, we look at highly leveraged entities. And we look at household debt, we look at all the other areas that represent a risk. And so when we look at the highly leveraged entity, this entity was extremely highly leveraged. And therefore, it represented a concern, and we did highlight that to various authorities that should be aware of it, and we wrote reports on it. And therefore, we monitored and engaged with the entity itself throughout this period. But then we conducted a formal investigation by taking statements from various people involved and so on, and taking documents and so on. And so that investigation was long drawn because it's a complex process, and that's now been completed.
Sorry, Tan Sri. Just to be very clear, I mean, the central bank had highlighted the risk related to this entity a couple of years already to the relevant persons or authorities, correct?
Yes. Concerns related to leverage.
P from BFM again. Just to put things into a bit of perspective for us, how prevalent are these STRs? That should it raise a concern among investors?
No, it should not raise a concern, because every financial system has it. And this STR doesn't just come from our local institutions, it comes from institutions from other parts of the world. They give it to their authority, and their authority give it to us if it involves a Malaysian. So there's nothing unique. This has been going on since the beginning of time.
Thank you.
Yes. And there's tremendous cooperation now because of the assessments that are made on countries of how they comply to these international rules. And therefore, everyone is assessed by their level of compliance to these international rules and regulations. And therefore, countries, if they receive information from their financial institutions, they should immediately inform the countries concerned if it involves individuals or businesses of their country.
Would you say that there's an increased prevalence now with terrorism, being so widespread?
There is an international body that is called the Financial Action Task Force that sets these international standards which the countries would have to comply with. And if you look into the website, you would see that this is something internationally that has gained momentum in recent years, ever since the global financial crisis, looking at how countries should ensure that the financial systems are not abused by criminals and things like that. So there is, like what Governor has said, the international standards themselves have been strengthened considerably lately, and there's a more rigor in assessing the country's compliance, and as such, the level of cooperation between countries now have also strengthened, because everyone would aspire to meet these international standards, because countries that do not meet these international standards can be blacklisted. And once you are blacklisted, your banks will not have access to the international financial system. So the implications for not complying with international standards are very, very, can be very extensive to a country.
Thank you.
All right. All right, two final questions. In front here.
Tan Sri, you mentioned earlier that 7 of your officers were questioned. Is that correct? Questioned or investigated? Can we know by which enforcement agency and on what was the subject of the questioning? And also, are you aware at all if any enforcement agency is waiting to question you? Have they tried and made an appointment with you?
The investigation is on the purported leakage of information, and it was by the police. Yes, and Bank Negara will always give cooperation to the other law enforcement agencies. All right, final question here.
Tan Sri, there's already speculation that outside that you might retire after the end of this tenure. Is that the message that you are sending out? And if so, when is the end of your tenure? And the other question is on the special task force. It was disbanded before the report was the report. Bank Negara submitted its report. Is there some discrepancy here, or
No,
was the investigations completed after, or because the task force was disbanded, therefore you had to complete the investigations?
No.
Okay.
That was the cycle of the investigation. It was a long process of taking statements and analyzing documents, thousands and thousands of pages of documents and so on. It was completed this week, and in fact they had to work round the clock to do it because and we felt that it's very important to have closure because of the nature of its implications. So it was just completed. It had nothing to do with the developments, and we are not aware of what the arrangements will be regarding the task force going forward, but we are aware that each agency continues to pursue the areas that are under its own, which is what it was before anyway. And regarding my term, as I said, I would be completing 16 years, and that's really a long time. And I would like to say that I've done everything I wanted to do. And we put in place something like more than 10 important legislations during my term in office that was very important. And the whole organizational transformation of the bank, we did 3 series of organizational transformation. And then related to all the other things we have done in transformation of the financial sector, financial inclusion and everything. But I want to say that there's a lot more to be done. For example, the migration to electronic payments, I would like to see more done on that front. And then on mobile banking and so on. And even in our foreign exchange market, it's reached a degree of maturity, but there's so much more. And I believe the team here in the bank can carry those areas forward and do all the things that need to be done, especially when we aspire to be a developed country by 2020. So 16 years is amongst a very long period, and I've been really privileged to have had this opportunity to in my career, to be given the opportunity to make a contribution to this country. So I'm truly grateful for it. Yes. Of course, answering questions from you.
16 years.
No.
16 years, you sound so tired.
16 years, I sound so?
After 16 years, you sound so tired.
No, I'm not tired. Our leadership center, ICLIF, has a summit every year about leadership energy. And you should watch the video because the last one, I wasn't here in the country, but they recorded my statement, how leaders need a very high level of energy. And where do you derive that energy from? A lot of it is your sense of purpose and conviction and clarity in what outcomes you want to achieve and so on. And it is like an athlete. I gave the example like an athlete when you're running to the finishing line. Where do you derive that determination and so on? So, that is all about leadership, having that leadership energy.
If there's a request under national service, will you continue to be the government?
Let us reach that bridge, then we will cross it at that time. But right now I have great aspirations to actually write a book before it fades in my memory. All right, thank you very much to everyone.
Sorry, Tan Sri, you have a Tan Sri. Madam Governor.
Yes.
Last question.
You had the last question.
You have an upcoming birthday. Any special wish for the for you and for the country?
No, you know, I was brought up to not have special days and like birthdays or anniversaries, and as a child, and because my father always said that, you know, you buy something for someone when you see something that person, and not when it is more meaningful than when there's a birthday or an anniversary. And my partner in life, which is also, we celebrated our 50th anniversary, also has the same view. So birthdays are not very special in our, it's just another day. All right, thank you.